I'm not feeling too well, Aunt May.
Well, you do feel warm, but she'll be here any minute. That's her. Go answer the door, Peter.
Don't I get a last meal?
Face it, Tiger. You just hit the jackpot.
With recent Spider-Man comics and other things, I figured it's about time to look at history and the various attempts Marvel has done to keep MJ and Peter apart, how long it's been going on, and how ridiculous it's gotten.
Face it, Tiger. You just hit the jackpot.
The most famous, of course, is One More Day. But it was not the only one. And, well, it's often done more harm than good. Consistently. Okay, why do writers keep doing this? Why does it keep happening? I'm going to talk about something and I'm going to give it a name and make it easy to refer to, because we're going to constantly circle back to it. We're going to call it the ideal Spider-Man.
Thanks, MJ. How about we launch rings next time?
It's shooting hoops. And yeah, next time, Tiger.
The ideal Spider-Man is the idea that there is this perfect Spider-Man who is the best version. The Spider-Man who could be used for any story or anything. The one who is the most relatable, the most put upon, and the one who can be in class scenarios. And this is just the truth of it. That Spider-Man never really existed. As much as Marvel likes the idea of Spider-Man being this evergreen character, the traits that they tend to focus on often go against what was published for the character, and how they handled him. But the traits of what they think the ideal is tend to be somewhat consistent. He's young, preferably in high school, wisecracks, works a dead-end job, single, tends to have bad public relations, can be slotted into any story, and well, that's impossible to maintain. You can't make everything perfectly timeless. No one can. What you're using now is going to tie you to a time or a place. And that's not bad at all. If a work manages to last outside of that time, that's special too. But Spider-Man early on actually did move forward as a comic. Spider-Man was only a high schooler for 28 issues of his original comic. He then went to college, got new friends, new love interests, and one did stick around, that being the world's most accidental love interest.
Sorry about the rain. Seems like you're having nothing but water problems lately.
You know, right now, it really doesn't seem like a problem.
Mary Jane was never meant to last. She was never meant to be a recurring character, but she proved popular, and well, let's talk about that.
It's not like we're going steady or something equally primitive. We're friends, okay?
I think it's important to know that comics being a visual medium, character looks are very important, and John Romita, the one who gave her the iconic look, tended to draw her the best.
Is it true you saw a lady in Manhattan that was like the basis for Mary Jane, or is that just a joke?
No.
You kidding me?
You mean Stan or me?
No, either one of you. I don't know. I thought I heard that story.
No, actually, he left it rather open to me how to interpret her. Actually, I think I based her partially on Anne Margaret.
Yeah, that's right.
I used Anne Margaret dimples and a cleft in the chin, and some of the full face smile that she had, because we were trying to make a girl that was very with it and very modern.
Now, the depiction of the intended love, Gwen, was not bad, but John's art tended to really place more on MJ. But also MJ was just kind of fun in a way. This wasn't bad in the early days, but MJ just became popular, and fans make fun of the depiction of her really out there lingo. Peter did get with Gwen in a very emotional story, but the comic did start to settle by the early hundreds of Amazing. Gwen and Peter's relationship became very ideal. The drama of her father's death was all but gone, and Gwen didn't seem to have a lot going on as a character. Now, I think you could have done something. I think people often forget how much fire MJ is as a character, unconnected to Peter sometimes. Like, even when she was dating Harry at the time and causing him stress, she was helping move the drama along and keep Spider-Man going.
A riddle, Mr. Parker. What do I have in common with Spider-Man?
You both look good in skin-tight outfits?
This brings us to the death of Gwen Stacy, created to shake things up and give Gary Conway something to never live down. This event marks a demarcation of Spider-Man. This would start an era of trying to keep him the same. It ironically did that by creating one of the most shocking status quo changes in comics at the time. It showed that anyone could die. Comics are often a contradiction unto themselves. It also set up MJ as more an interesting character. Death is often a shocking thing, so to see this party girl shaken up and wanting to help Peter also made her a strong character. MJ was never intended to be this, but she ended up that way. And Peter and MJ would be together for a long time, a couple of years all told in comics. Let's get to it.
Gotta say, Tiger, you fill out that costume nicely.
This was not meant to last, and a new creative team came in to break them up. And it wouldn't be the first time that Marv Wolfman took over Spider-Man, and one of the first things he did was break up Peter and MJ by having Peter propose to her. But ironically, looking back, she is afraid of commitment. She leaves, and this begins Peter Parker, the Bachelor About Town era. And boy, it is filled with a lot of detours and drama.
Your shots are so good.
Like, I'm going to point this out. For a period of time, Peter was essentially kind of dating Betty Brant when she was married to Ned Leeds. So Peter Parker during the 70s was basically in an affair. Spider-Man was marketed to kids. There was also Deb Whiteman, who was nearly driven insane by Peter Parker's antics. I would blame Peter on some level, but she was also so boring that I can't blame the writers for not having any idea what to do with her. But one love interest stuck out. No, it wasn't Sissy Ironwood, who was definitely a real character and not someone I'm tricking you into thinking was real. It was the Black Cat.
I forgot you don't believe in happily ever after these days. But don't you still believe in love, in opening your heart to others?
I don't know. Maybe I will again, someday.
Why did she stick out? Well, this is my take, but I feel she did bring a fresh air to Spider-Man. It changed the dynamic for once in the comic. It also gave Peter a reason to want to focus on Spider-Man over Peter complicating his life. After the revelation of who he was, she eventually got over it a bit. It became Spider-Man's confidant, bringing a new dynamic to them. But I will say that it's dependent on what comic you're reading. I think people often ignore how important the Spectacular Spider-Man comic is to Peter. A lot of important stories happen in this comic, and is the meat of the Black Cat romance. But if you looked at Amazing Spider-Man, not a whole lot was going on in the romance front. While Black Cat would get cameos and mentions during the Roger Stern era, you can't help but notice dating mostly takes a back seat to Peter Parker's life and mysteries. This gets us to...
Oh!
Hello.
Oh, wow.
MJ coming back. This would be the longest time MJ was gone from the comics. The longest time. A couple years all told. But you can't keep a good redhead down. She was planned just to show up, get a couple issues, and leave. This didn't happen. At all. Just to mention this now, keep in mind Spider-Man also had a comic strip that had her as the main love interest. Stan Lee was mostly working on that now, and he never broke them up. Roger Stern is not a fan of MJ, but he did give her hints at a dark backstory, and this gets to why I think out of all the characters, MJ sticks out so hard, because writers keep using her and adding to her. She just ended up with so much history and depth that new loves just can't measure up. New characters in these long comics are always going to have uphill battles. But in cases of new love interests for Peter, you have to ask, why do fans tend to like her more? And I think that there's a couple strong reasons for that. One, she is similar to Peter Parker, but not in the way other writers tend to do it with new love interests. That often just means making her a nerd. She's not nerdy, but she has her own dark secrets she doesn't like to tell. She wears a mask to people, like Peter does.
We have to get out too!
No! This is my school! I have to help the students in Max. Please get to safety. I'll meet you after.
But also, she contrasts Peter. She's proactive, wants to live the high life, and wants to be the center of attention, too. It gives her a dynamic to Peter Parker that is more varied compared to others. But moving on, MJ stuck around in the comics, and she revealed another big thing. She knew Peter Parker was Spider-Man, and that was the reason why they actually more or less broke up. Peter and her talk like adults about it, and understand each other more. After this, Peter and MJ would kind of date, but one thing was brewing in the comic strip.
Can't believe it ended this way.
Yeah, I guess you'd probably like to go home and...
No way. I'm late enough for my wedding as it is.
You see, Stan Lee got it in his head to marry both Peter and MJ in the strip, but also have that in the comic. So they coordinated with the comics to have this happen. And well, let's just be honest, not everyone agreed. Spider-Man editorial was going through a rough period for a couple of reasons. One, ego with everyone involved. And you can see this manifest the most with the Hobgoblin storyline at the time. The marriage happened for two major reasons. Stan Lee's clout kind of overrode everyone, so not even Jim Shooter could say no, and the publicity of it was a huge factor in getting it ahead. This would cause several stories and problems, which I will acknowledge.
The tongue-in-cheek ceremony was an intimate one. 50,000 guests were on hand at Shea Stadium to watch cartoon character Spider-Man marry longtime love Mary Jane Watson.
I pronounce you
Spider-Man creator Stan Lee officiated at the home plate ceremony. The cartoon couple is taking a honeymoon trip to the Riviera and will probably live happily ever after, at least until the next issue of The Amazing Spider-Man.
The wedding issue of the Spider-Man comic hits newsstands tomorrow.
Black Cat was the major love interest in the comics at the time, but they were working a Betty and Veronica angle with them too, so she was left out in the cold to set up the MJ marriage. It wasn't the most clean storyline ever. You couldn't do the Peter Parker dating story anymore. And thank God, because every comic was doing that. Did you know that Clark Kent was doing it? Everyone does it. I mean, it's like Superhero 101. It's not special. Sorry, I have some unresolved issues. But credit where it's due. They stuck to the marriage for a while. One big thing writers were struggling with was we don't want Peter too happy. But it often felt like they were excuses more than real problems. I think the problem is that the problem is they want Spider-Man a certain way, but don't think on how the new setups could help with that. Oh, MJ is a model. Well, why not just make her a C-list celeb who can't be an A-list, or fail and get another job? Some writers did this too.
Peter, what a beautiful place. I just hope you two bachelors don't ruin it with Dayglow velvet paintings.
Oh, and I suppose your place is going to be filled with Warhols.
Please, Hockneys and Motherwells. No offense, but you and Harry could be busted any minute by the design police.
MJ is too hot for Peter Parker. Sorry, writers and fans, but Peter is actually attractive himself. Like, I know people really buy into that he's perfectly relatable, but Peter was never bad at dating. Or else how was he able to do it so often? Like, MJ is not the only hot Peter Parker girlfriend. Even Deb Whitman is very attractive. So the idea that MJ is somehow too hot for a guy who somehow managed to get every attractive woman on the regular, what comic have you been reading? So to me, it's more an excuse. And I think if writers tried, and many of them have, it's actually not that hard. But I think it's why the ideal Spider-Man is kind of the ultimate problem. They don't want to write current Spider-Man. They want to write the perfect Spider-Man.
What you bet?
Loser dresses as a cheerleader for Halloween?
Well, big boy, I hope you've got the legs for the skirt. Come on, Tiger, let's hit the dance floor. I want to see what you've got.
Mary Jane would become a supporting character and sounding board for Peter. And honestly, it wasn't too bad. She did have some marital drama storylines, but Spider-Man editorial thought it went too far with Spider-Man, but she wasn't the only reason. I think she was the most obvious indicator that Spider-Man isn't classic Spider-Man. But they killed off a lot of major characters at the time. There was the convoluted Peter's parents' story and Maximum Carnage. I blame more the era than the marriage. This leads us to, you all knew this was coming. I'm going to try not to spend that much time on this era, but the 3-year, 200+ issue storyline. Okay, people, it's time for the Clone Saga.
My name is Ben Riley. I'm related to this reality's Peter Parker. How? I'm his clone. Or maybe he's my clone. We're not sure.
The Clone Saga was not bad on paper. It really isn't. The idea was simple. We want to get more classic Spider-Man back. And how do we do that? By making this story that is a mess, apparently. The plan for the story changed hard during its time. The ideas could have involved time travel, more clones, more everything. It's a hard story to talk about because there's just so much to talk about. The idea was to introduce a Spider-Man without the marriage clutter or drama of recent years. A nice idea, but the plot line with him being the real Spider-Man was not well received because at that point, Peter was already established. Now, one big problem with talking about this is that they flip-flopped on it so much in this era. From Ben being the clone to also the MJ drama, which I will talk about, is the most infamous moment. MJ was revealed to be pregnant during the era, and Peter, having a mental breakdown, hit her during one part of the story. The writers then backpedaled hard on this, and they became the most stable thing in the world after. What they did to try to get there was move Spider-Man to another state, and have him and MJ settle down, while Ben became Spider-Man. The problem is, well, what happened was this. The marketing team at Marvel kept the Clone Saga going way past its sell-by date, and basically any good idea attached to it, by then, became poison, and everyone just wanted it to be done. But this left them with Peter Parker as a dad in some form, so they had MJ miscarry. Or is it? Yeah, they had Norman kidnap the baby because everyone didn't want to be known as the guy who killed Peter Parker's kid. Yeah, if you're wondering why the kid actually did survive, everyone in the room realized that this could become what they were known for in the comics. And well, they all backed down on it. But you know, this plot point is left dangling in the wind for some AU that you should read.
Well, how long before you graduate, Red?
Ew, creepy. And why would you say that anyway? That is so wrong.
Anyway, MJ and Peter would go back to what they were in the late 80s, a couple trying to make it. This is kind of a lost era for fans, but it brings us to the next breakup, the John Byrne era. John Byrne was brought in to bring new life to Spider-Man, like he did with Superman in the 80s. He even got his own reboot comic called Chapter 1 to retell Spider-Man's history, Man of Steel style. This was a huge failure. The comics were just not very good, and also reading too old school. But the truth is, they were thought that by getting readers to hate Happy Peter Parker, they would like a more classic setup. Once they got to it, this didn't work. For one, relating to Peter Parker is a double-edged sword, because fans also want to see him happy. While they relate to him when he has problems, they also relate to him when he's happy. So the idea that they can make people hate a happy Peter, it's kind of stupid. It relies on the idea that the comic becomes boring and people want the drama. And I think if you go about it like that, you're missing the fact that people just want to see a good Spider-Man story, not your meta-perfect ideal Spider-Man. During this time, they also tried to write Mary Jane as what's keeping him from being Spider-Man, basically writing her as a wet blanket, who's trying to keep her husband alive so he can have a nice life. Look, you can see why this didn't work, right? Anyway, this leads them to do one of the most drastic things to get rid of her. Kill her off. And there are plenty of reasons why this didn't stick.
There you are! How dare you keep us waiting so long?
Whoa! Wait! Stop!
Hey, can't your fiancé give you a kiss anymore?
Great, Parker. Here you're engaged to somebody you don't even know. I'm sorry, Miss,
Funny, Peter. The name's Gwen Stacy?
Now, the primary reason Gwen only showed up in a cameo role in Spider-Man the Animated Series was she died in the comics. They didn't want kids to suddenly read the comics and realized the lead Love was dead, so Mary Jane filled in on the cartoon. And then you had Ultimate Spider-Man, which for many was the modern Spider-Man comic, used her too as the lead love interest. The thing is, by that time they really wanted to kill MJ, but she was being used in way too many things to keep that up. Plus, the major love interest replacement during this era was Jill Stacy. And while Jill exists, and you can't help but feel like she was there to bring too much Gwen drama, and Peter already had a lot. It just wasn't ideal. Plus, Peter was a widower, and the Gwen drama just left him feeling weird, like they wanted to have this free dating Peter, but the actual stories kept him from being it. Again, they settled on an idea, but didn't realize that, oh, this is worse. And so MJ came back, because my God, you cannot keep a good redhead down.
Hope is something you've got to have. It kept me going when you were gone. Mary Jane, all this has made me realize just how precious you are to me.
MJ's story would be that she needed time away from Peter after the kidnapping, and she was in LA. And this brings up the reason in the modern day people like MJ and the JMS run. Well, we'll get to One More Day, but for now, let's see what it was like before. The thing about JMS, well, it didn't have Peter becoming a science god like in Slot's run. Peter was still fixing his life in it compared to previous runs. He was contemplating on what difference he could make and change people. He became a science teacher. He talked to Aunt May. The reason the people defend this run, despite having two bad stories, is this. This right here that mattered was good. Peter and MJ together. It was a high point. Sad to say, not everyone saw it that way. Enter Joe Quesada, who is a contradiction of a man. Now, he was the one who ordered One More Day to happen, and he basically makes every mistake you could do with a story like this. And I'm going to tell you the biggest failure of One More Day. It's a story, and that feels like it has to lead somewhere. The truth is, the way he set it up left enough room in it to get fixed, and, well, his plan for Spider-Man boils down to trying to stop fixes. But the truth of One More Day, and interviews say this, is they wanted to be Archie. Archie, the never-changing comic character who even at the time was seen as a dated relic, and was second at the time to Sonic the Hedgehog in the publishing line. Wait, did I say second? I meant third, after Sabrina the Teenage Witch. Look, guys, I'm going to point this out. Riverdale actually changing up, admittedly in some of the weirdest ways possible, actually got people into him a bit more. The character was stuck till that happened. Look, I like Archie, so don't take this as Archie is a terrible comic. But you have Spider-Man. You don't need him to be Archie. He's Spider-Man. So after One More Day, they wanted new love interests. So why didn't they stick? Well, they didn't bring new dynamics. At least that's my view. Carly Cooper. Okay, she loves Peter Parker over Spider-Man, like Mary Jane. Okay, she has a relationship with Gwen, like Mary Jane and Jill. Okay, she's nerdy, like Deb Whitman, and you can see why she's kind of boring. And here's the thing, the creators dug their own grave with One More Day. It meant anytime MJ shows up, people were wondering how they were going to handle it, basically making her an instant sales boost and keeping her in the comic. And this whole cucking Peter thing wasn't even the first time. They had her own hookup with a fireman before. And yeah, like the truth is, a lot of writers now want instant drama. And the truth for that, you have to rely on continuity. Wait, why? The truth is, to get quick drama, setup is needed, and history established. MJ is often thought of as the main love interest for Spider-Man, outside of comics too. So if you want to get relationship drama from Spider-Man and make it juicy, you have to use MJ. Look, to create the shock moments, most writers do what they have to and look to the past. The characters with the most history out of Pete's love interests is Mary Jane at this point. And guys, there's actually a wealth of MJ spin-off material. She has novels, she has basically a shoujo Spider-Man romance comic about her finding out she loves Peter Parker, told entirely from her perspective. And so Nick Spencer got them back together eventually, because my God, this somehow lasted longer than most, but even then, they could not keep her out. So let's talk about the most recent issues. at the time of this writing. The comic starts with a 6 months later theme, so it's a time skip, and they're just going to have to fill us in on the details during the story, yeah? I think this comic failed for a couple of reasons. I think not showing what Spider-Man did was one, because in the comics, most Spider-Man fans are used to understanding Peter. The comic won't tell us anything about the situation to make us understand, so it's frustrating to read because we have to wait to find out. This is a comic trying to dangle, and the comic's end was showing us no context. But this isn't what infuriates me about it. It's that it won't tell us anything for the first issue, and I honestly couldn't care less about it, because I don't know what the stakes are. It's not a good first issue. Maybe we'll read well in the trade, but if you want people to follow the story for months, get a better first chapter. Plus, look, Nick Lowe, you're not Stan Lee. We can see the game you're playing, and you're not that clever. What is there left to say? Well, to me, it's this. Who knows what issue 2 will do? Or the rest of the series, for that matter. And maybe the full story will be good, but I'm not buying it till I read it first. What this does is make me question Nick Lowe as an editor, because all I'm seeing him do is a waste of time Spider-Man story that tries to be meaningful but can't connect to readers. Like, I think he has a problem reading things. And well, I hope this video showed you one thing. There's no ideal Spider-Man. There is a Spider-Man who is always around with some elements of it, but not all of them, and that's for the best. It means when Spider-Man works, he's never limited by it. We can tell any story with him and have elements of Spider-Man. He can change and be adapted into a lot of different things. You can have Spider-Man as a father, showing that he's still got it. A confident and experienced superhero who knows what is going on because he's seen it all. And that, circling back to MJ, she's never been the problem. The writers want her to be the problem. But the main core problem is thinking Spider-Man has been frozen in amber since his first issue. No, Spider-Man has changed, for the better and the worse. And he's going to change again. Look, if the comic keeps going, it's going to adapt. But guess what? New writers are going to be exposed to other media of Spider-Man first, and MJ is still the one, even in Spider-Verse. The writers are going to play their game, but they should realize that maybe they need to be open to new things. If we can have a show about Superman and Lois raising 2 kids, I don't think people are going to be mad that Spider-Man is middle-aged with kids.